Mauritius has had 5 names. The Arabs called it Dina Arobi, the island of desolation. The Portuguese marked it on their charts and never landed. The Dutch named it after their prince, stripped its forests of ebony, and left. The French turned it into Ile-de-France, filled its fields with sugarcane and its ports with enslaved labour. The British took it by force in 1810, gave it back its old name, and kept everything else. Five flags, 5 languages etched into the same soil. 5 chapters of arrival, extraction and departure, each one leaving behind a ruin, a recipe, or a religion that the next could not erase. And yet, long before any ship appeared on the horizon, the island had already written its own story. Volcanoes had built it from the seafloor 8 million years ago. Coral had softened its edges. The forest had grown so thick that the interior remained unmapped for centuries after the coast was claimed. That forest is nearly gone. The names have settled into one. But the layers geological, human, sacred remain stacked so tightly that a single afternoon can carry you from a Hindu temple inside a volcanic crater, to a cliff where enslaved people chose death over recapture, to a beach where the sand creates the illusion of a waterfall plunging into the abyss. This is Mauritius, the lost Eden of Africa. An island that has been found 5 times and never once fully understood. Le Morne, Brabant, rises 556 metres straight from the Indian Ocean. A single basalt monolith, dark and sheer, draped in cloud on most mornings. It is the last standing remnant of the volcanic fire that built this island 8 million years ago. Everything else has softened. Le Morne has not. At its base, a barrier reef holds back the open sea and creates one of the calmest lagoons in the southern hemisphere. The water here is shallow enough to wade through, turquoise enough to seem painted. Small boats drift where the reef breaks. A coastal road traces the foot of the mountain, threading between resort walls and fishing villages that have not moved in generations. But Le Morne carries a weight that no photograph can show. UNESCO inscribed it in 2008 not for its geology, not for its beauty, but for a silence at its summit that the world agreed must never be forgotten. The mountain still stands, And the story it holds, one we will return to, does not fade. From the air, it looks exactly like a waterfall plunging into the abyss. A cascade of white and blue spilling over the edge of the sea floor. Except there is no waterfall. There is no abyss. What the eye sees is sand. Volcanic sediment, carried by ocean currents off the island's coastal shelf, slides down an underwater slope that drops thousands of metres into open ocean. From above, the runoff creates a perfect illusion, the appearance of water falling through water, a geological trick that no camera can resist. It is one of the most shared images from the Indian Ocean. And it exists only in the angle of the observer, a reminder that even nature keeps its best secrets in plain sight. At Makonde, where the southern tip of Mauritius juts into open water, the island runs out of patience with the sea. The road does not stop at the cliff, it bends around it, a narrow ribbon of asphalt suspended between volcanic rock and ocean. Below, waves shatter against basalt that has not moved in millions of years. The south makes no concessions to comfort. There are no parasols here, no lounges, no shade, only black rock, salt spray, and the constant percussion of the Indian Ocean reminding the land where it ends. Visitors stand at the viewpoint in silence, dwarfed by the scale of what surrounds them. The southern edge reveals what tourism often hides, that this island was forged in fire, tempered by the sea, and only later softened by coral and time. West of the mountains, the ocean changes. The reef line visible from the air as a pale ribbon of breaking surf holds the swell at a distance. And the water between it and shore turns a turquoise, so saturated it looks artificially lit. At Flick on Flack, one of the longest beaches on the island, sailboats sit motionless in the lagoon. Families wade through water that barely reaches the knee. This is where Mauritius exhales, where the rhythm slows, the horizon flattens, and the island, for a moment, asks nothing of the visitor at all. In the highlands of Chamarel, the earth cannot decide what colour to be. 7 distinct shades, red, brown, violet, green, blue, purple or yellow, lie side by side in undulating dunes, exposed to rain and wind and time. They have never mixed. Not once. The explanation is volcanic. Basaltic lava, cooling at different temperatures millions of years ago, produced iron and aluminium oxides in varying concentrations, each compound settling into its own layer. But why the colours refuse to blend, even when stirred by hand, remains a question that geologists have posed. And the Earth has declined to answer. A short distance from the coloured dunes, the highland plateau breaks open. Two columns of water drop nearly 100 metres into a pool hidden by jungle canopy Chamarel Waterfall, the tallest on the island. Mist rises slowly from the basin. The sound reaches you before the sight does. From above, the falls appear almost gentle twin threads of white against a dark, volcanic cliff. But at the base, the force is enough to carve stone. Chamarel does not rush. It simply never stops. Deeper into the interior, the terrain drops again. Tamarin Falls, also called the Seven Cascades, descends nearly 300 metres through a gorge that narrows as it deepens, each tier spilling into the next, each pool colder than the one above. From the rim, the cascade reveals its full architecture pool to ledge to freefall, 7 times over. Each stage carved deeper into the gorge than the last. The water does not pause between levels. It simply finds the next edge and falls again. Mauritius was once entirely forested. Today, less than 2% of that original canopy survives. Most of what remains is here in Black River Gorges, a national park that protects the island's last wilderness. Somewhere beneath this canopy, the pink pigeon and the echo parakeet still breed. These are species that were, not long ago, among the rarest birds on Earth. What this forest guards is not just habitat. It is the memory of what this island was before the world arrived. At 1,800 feet above sea level, inside the crater of an extinct volcano, there is a lake. That lake, Hindus believe, is connected by underground channels to the Ganges itself. This is Ganga Talao Grand Bassin, the most sacred site in Mauritius. A 33-metre statue of Shiva, the tallest outside India, watches over the water. Each year, during Maha Shivaratri, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims walk barefoot from every corner of the island to pray at its edge. It is one of the largest Hindu gatherings outside the subcontinent. Nearly half of Mauritius is Hindu descendants of indentured labourers brought from India in the 19th century. Their faith crossed an ocean. And here, in a volcanic crater surrounded by forest, it found a home that has not moved since. Not far from the eastern coast, in a small coral island, is being slowly returned to what it looked like before any human set foot on it. Île aux Aigrettes, barely a square kilometre, is the site of one of the longest ecological restoration projects in the Indian Ocean. Since 1987, conservationists have removed invasive rats, cats, and foreign plants, and reintroduced species that had all but vanished from the wild, including birds once down to single-digit populations and giant tortoises that had not walked this soil in centuries. It is a slow project, measured in decades rather than seasons. But life is returning, and the forest is beginning to look like itself again. Off the western coast, pilot whales move through waters they have navigated for thousands of years. They surface briefly dark shapes against a darker sea before sliding back into a depth that no drone can follow. Each one weighs more than a car. They can dive to 1,000 metres, and they do it in silence. Mauritius is one of the few places on Earth where it is possible to swim alongside them year-round. In the water, the scale reverses. They were here long before the first ship arrived. And if the ocean is given what it needs, they will be here long after the last one leaves. Port Louis feels less like a city that was planned and more like one that accumulated layer upon layer, century upon century. The harbour still handles cargo from 3 continents. The Cordon waterfront faces the sea with the quiet confidence of a port. That has never stopped working since the French built it in the 18th century. Above the rooftops, Fort Adelaide watches over the capital from a hilltop the British fortified in 1834. Its cannons once pointed at the harbour. Now they point at office towers. The city has changed hands 5 times: Dutch, French, British, Japanese occupation, independence. And each era left something behind without fully erasing what came before. Lapus Mountain rises behind the skyline like a raised thumb, a volcanic sentinel over a city, where Creole, Hindu, Muslim, and Chinese communities share streets that no single culture has ever fully owned. The northern coast is where Mauritius turns outward. Grand Bay, a bay dense with catamarans, charter yachts, and speedboats from a dozen countries, is the island's busiest marina. and its most cosmopolitan shoreline. A few kilometres east, Bainboeuf tells a quieter version of the same coast. Wooden fishing boats where the yachts thin out, nets drying on the sand, and a pace that belongs to the tide rather than to a departure schedule. A short boat ride from the western shore, Îlot Bénitier, sits in water so transparent the hulls appear to hover above the sand. There are no roads here, no buildings, no electricity, just coral, casuarina trees, and a silence that the mainland has long since forgotten. Le Morne rises behind the lagoon, the same mountain, seen now from across the water, stripped of its drama and reduced to a silhouette. From here, even the monument looks gentle. The eastern coast moves at a different speed. At Trou d'Eau Douce, a white-roofed church faces a bay where fishing boats sit so tightly packed they form a floating mosaic. This village was built for commerce and daily life, not for visitors. From above, the harbour is a geometry of masts and painted hulls, each boat tethered to a rhythm that has not changed in generations. The fishermen leave before dawn and return before the heat becomes unbearable. The rest of the day belongs to the village. Further south, at Mahébourg, the bay holds a quieter distinction. In 1810, the Battle of Grand Port was fought in these waters. It was the only naval victory Napoleon valued enough to inscribe on the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. The cannons are gone. The bay has not changed. Behind the beaches, Mauritius is farmland. Sugarcane covers nearly 90% of the island's arable land, an inheritance from the plantation economy that once defined everything here. The fields stretch unbroken across the central plateau, interrupted only by roads lined with flame trees. At Pamplemousses, the botanical garden founded by the French in 1735, the oldest in the southern hemisphere, still holds giant Victoria Amazonica lily pads wide enough for a child to stand on. It was here that the island's first sugarcane seedlings were planted, beginning an industry that would define Mauritius for the next 3 centuries. Small Hindu temples rise between the rows of cane, bright against the green. Easy to miss from the air, but impossible to overlook on the ground. This is where most Mauritians actually live. Not at the beach, not at the resort, but here, in the interior, the cameras rarely reach. As the sun drops behind Le Morne, The lagoon shifts from turquoise to gold. The mountain darkens into silhouette. The reef goes quiet. And for a moment, the island looks exactly as it must have looked before anyone arrived. Volcanic, still, and entirely its own. Mauritius has been shaped by loss of species, of freedom, of empire after empire. And yet it remains. Every paradise carries the weight of what was sacrificed to create it, and the question of what must still be protected to keep it whole. This is not an island that asks to be admired. It asks to be understood. And understanding it truly takes longer than any single visit can provide. But those are stories for another journey. Thanks for watching. See you soon.